Welcome, everybody, to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga. Today, live on June the 12th, I got another round of stories around the NFL to get to on today's episode, starting off with Jordan Love, the Green Bay Packers quarterback, talking about not needing a wide receiver number one per se. That is the mantra, the usual for these NFL teams, but Jordan Love doesn't believe that needs to be the case for the Green Bay Packers. We're going to get into that. And also some more running back rankings, this time in the NFC West. Talking about the Seahawks and Kenneth Walker, the 49ers and Christian McCaffrey, obviously, and much more. Plus the absences and notable appearances in the mandatory minicamps this week. While that is going on, there's a lot of other stuff that dictates whether players show up or not. I'm going to get into who was there, who was surprisingly not there, and what to make of all of this, plus so much more on today's show. So please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And also, if you have any questions or comments you want to make during today's show, use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net, that you see on your screen. By using that, I'm able to see your question or comment in my chat box, and that way I'll read it on air and get your guys' thoughts and perspective on anything I say or on any of the topics on today's show. It's a massive help for the network and also this show, so please, if you guys would, use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. And in saying that, we can jump into that topic that I mentioned there. The Green Bay Packers and their quarterback Jordan Love, while still figuring out his contract situation and working out a long-term extension with the team, he was still present at mandatory minicamp. That is the rule, that is the expectation for all these players. Even if you are working out a contract, you still are supposed to be there. Jordan Love opted to be there while others decided not to be. He showed up and he was asked about the wide receiver situation that is going on with the Green Bay Packers. Last year they had about 4 receivers record over 500 yards in Jayden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Dontayvion Wicks, and Christian Watson, who technically had 422, but he only played 9 games, so I'm throwing him in there as well as another receiver to record 500 yards. And what's interesting about these guys is that they're all super young. To go along with Jordan Love, I want to say, is 24, 25 years old, and all these guys are in their first and second years in the NFL too. So you got a bunch of 22 and 23-year-olds out there. One, it's very cheap for the Packers, but to get such a compensation and such great productivity from these 4 wide receivers as a collective, I think is very remarkable and very fortunate for the Green Bay Packers in this situation. But now that brings up the question, who's the main guy? Who's the guy that you have to go to when you need a 4th down conversion, when you need a crucial 3rd down conversion as well? Who's the guy that Jordan Love looks to make sure it gives them the best chance of converting and just keeping the drive alive, or if you need a crucial touchdown, that sort of thing, Jordan Love was asked the question, and he said, I think you don't have to have a number 1 receiver. I think it works out well when you can spread the ball out and you get different guys making different plays and you can put them in different areas. Also, made sure to mention that it puts more pressure on opposing defenses and it helps out in the long run, and believes that all his wide receivers are capable of stepping up in those moments. But I'm a little bit on the other side of it. I'm on the fence, I guess, to some extent, because I get what he's saying. Of course, you want to have multiple number 1 receivers, right? Multiple guys that you can count on. But at the same time, I think I'd be settled. I'd be content with maybe 3 guys. I think once you push 4 and into 5, if you include the tight ends per se, then I think it gets a little dicey. And the Packers have 4 decent to very good receivers on their roster. And the way I see it, I think it is a little dicey. Just based on the facts I looked up into some of these situations with past successful teams in Super Bowls and just in the playoffs. The last 5 Super Bowl winners have had a main guy to go to, a go-to number 1 wide receiver that was very distinctly the number 1 guy. If you look back to the last 2 Super Bowls, that guy was Travis Kelce. In 2022, it was Cooper Kupp. And in 2021, it was Mike Evans. And also in 2020, in that Super Bowl, it was Tyreek Hill. So all I'm sure we could all agree, very distinct number one guys on their team. And then you can go even further past those 5 years. And while the wide receivers might not stand out and it might be a little bit closer, seemingly similar to what the Green Bay Packers have going on right now, that is the case. That is a similarity, but the defenses on those teams were a lot better, quite frankly, than the Green Bay Packers defense that they have going on right now. If you just look at it, the Super Bowl before 2020, the New England Patriots, they only allowed 3 points in that game to the Los Angeles Rams. Then you go back even further, the Philadelphia Eagles. While that game was 41-33, that Eagles defense still was very good and had to do a lot in that game to make sure Tom Brady didn't muster up another fourth quarter comeback to win or at least tie that Super Bowl up. And then the year before that as well, the Patriots in that game against the Falcons, obviously mounting that comeback in the second half. That takes a massive defensive capability to do that. So do the Packers have a defense up to that standard? Well, just last year in 2023, they had the fifth worst rushing defense in the game or in the league, allowing 128 rushing yards per game, fifth worst in the NFL. And then you look at the passing game, and it's a little bit better. They ranked 10th in points per game for 20 points allowed per game, and also they ranked 9th in passing yards per game at around 206. The passing defense isn't awful. You could survive with that, but the run defense is really where it really tilts it not in favor of the Packers for having a top 5, top 10 defense, because the run defense really is demoralizing. If you can't stop the run, then it obviously opens up a whole other dimension for these offenses. And then at that point, you're really just out there guessing. You don't want to overcompensate the run. Then you're wide open on the back end and stuff like that. You know how it goes when defenses try to patch up different holes where they just don't have the capability of doing so. That's where the Packers sort of lose me in this argument, because if they don't have a number one and they want to spread it out to these guys, you'd have to have a very reliable defense. And to me, the Green Bay Packers don't have that up until now. Of course, that could change. Maybe, of course, there's improvements. They could add somebody else throughout the regular season. That's a possibility. But speaking right now, I don't think the Packers have that. And then you get back to the discussion about the receivers, and that also brings up some other challenges, you could say, to a very young team. Because last year, I felt that the Packers, there wasn't very much, going into that year. Not many people expected them to not only make the playoffs, but perform very well in those playoffs. Jordan Love had a crazy run there towards the end of the year, and also that game in Dallas, obviously, and then playing very good in San Francisco. A shame that he couldn't get it done, but that surprised a lot of people. A very young team, no expectations. Not a lot of teams have film on them or really consider them a threat until, they're punched in the mouth and proven otherwise. So I think the Packers surprised a lot of people. Now, in their second year altogether, they're going to have to deal with that. Defense is now having a scouting report on them and really knowing what they like to go to, all their tendencies and stuff like that, and making sure they can counter that with something else. That's always a major challenge for these young teams. And also, you could give them a little bit of credit to Matt LaFleur for having such a great scheme to get some of these guys open potentially at times. If they're not fully developed yet, I think Matt LaFleur has a lot to do with how great this offense looked and getting all these guys open and getting all these guys a piece of the pie, per se, to also be successful in their own right. Then you also look at it as a team where the financial benefits obviously are great, and that also benefits the Packers to have all these options, still young and still benefiting you to the best of their abilities. But I think it would be fair to say now that the trial's still out on the Green Bay Packers, but I think you do need that go-to guy that will be open or that will give you the best chance of completing that pass, because it really eliminates the possibility of having to find somebody, if that makes sense. When you have 4 guys that you think could be open, you do like them in their matchups. It's all favorable across the board, but that means you have to try and find somebody, depending on the defense, if it's a zone or if they're manning it up or they're trying to disguise it in a way. It takes up more time to first analyze that, know what you're looking at, analyze the picture, and then trying to find somebody that you hope is open. If the first option isn't there, you have to go to the second and go through your progression that way. That takes up a lot of time rather than knowing a guy that I don't even have to look his way. I know once 2 seconds, 3 seconds into my hitch goes by, I know he's going to be open. That's the timing. That's the route that we have planned out. And you know he's going to be open, and you probably know he's going to complete it. That's where my thought process goes with all of this and the Green Bay Packers. Not to say that none of them can eventually get there, because I doubt all 4 of them stay on the Packers for the next 5 to 6 years. But for right now, I'm probably leaning towards the other way and thinking that you need a number 1 guy to go to if you want to get to those Super Bowls and get to those moments, the pinnacles of these seasons, and have it swing your way. I think you do need that number 1 guy, in my opinion, but maybe the Packers prove me otherwise. But until they do, I think it is just a little bit too many cooks in the kitchen, if you guys have ever heard that saying before. That's really what I'm going to now and heading towards with the Packers. They are a great team. I really like how they're built, but I think it needs to be a little bit more determined, a little bit more selfish by someone to step up and say, I'm the guy, give me the ball in these moments, and I'll deliver for the team. But we're going to see how it all plays out. The Packers are still young. They're still growing, but up until this point, they've done it all right. Now it'll be interesting to see in their second season how they really counter a lot of the best punches that defenses throw their way. But that'll be that for that segment. There's a lot more to come on today's show. Like I mentioned, we're going to get into the running back rankings that I have for the NFC West right after the break. Talking Cardinals, Seahawks, Rams, and 49ers all in just a few seconds. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.